James Cameron reached the bottom of the Mariana Trench and said it looked deader than the moon. A flat gray desert with the lights off. No fish, nothing alive at all. Just a couple of pale specks drifting past his window. For a place we'd spent a century imagining as full of monsters, that was the verdict. Empty. Except it wasn't. Over the next decade, cameras dropped into that same darkness, kept catching things moving in it. Animals that, by the known rules of biology, should not be able to live down there at all. Here are 7 of them. To understand why any of this is strange, you have to understand where we're actually going. The Mariana Trench sits in the western Pacific, out past the island of Guam. At its lowest point, a place called the Challenger Deep, it falls to nearly 11 kilometers below the surface. That is deeper than Mount Everest is tall. Lift Everest off the ground, lower it into the trench, and the peak would still sit more than 2 kilometers underwater. Sunlight has never reached the bottom, not once in the entire history of the planet. The water hangs just above freezing, and the pressure down there is over 1,000 times what you feel standing on the ground right now. Enough to fold an ordinary submarine flat in about a second. Picture balancing a car on the tip of your finger, and then holding that same weight across every square inch of your body at once. That is the everyday condition of the place. And it is not one small pit, either. The Challenger Deep is a valley split into 3 separate basins along the floor of the trench, each one a lightless canyon we've barely surveyed. For most of human history, we assumed nothing complicated could possibly survive it. Too cold, too black, too crushing, too starved of food. After the first 2 men touched the bottom in 1960, the deepest place on the planet sat completely unvisited for 52 years, longer than the gap between the first flight and the first moon landing. And the problem down there isn't only the pressure and the cold, it's the hunger. Almost nothing grows in permanent darkness, so nearly all the food in the trench has to fall from far above, the slow drift of dead plankton and the occasional carcass sinking kilometers through the black. Anything living at the bottom is surviving on scraps that rain down from a world it will never see. Cold, crushing, lightless, and starving. That is the place. And then we started dropping cameras into it. Almost everything on this list comes back to one man. His name is Jamieson, a deep-sea biologist who has probably spent more hours staring at Hadal Trench footage than anyone alive. He runs a research program built specifically to study the deepest zones of the ocean, and he was the chief scientist on the 5 Deeps expedition, the mission that sent Victor Vescovo to the bottom of all 5 oceans. Jamieson's method is almost stubborn in its simplicity. He builds weighted landers, rigs them with cameras and bait, and drops them into the dark, over and over, for years at a time, then waits for them to fall free and come back up. There is no pilot, no cable, no one to steer. Just a machine falling through the dark to a place no human is watching, its cameras rolling on whatever chooses to swim past. And here's the part that tells you who he is. After hundreds of those drops into the deepest places on Earth, he still talks about being surprised. Not disappointed by the emptiness Cameron described, but genuinely surprised, because the trench keeps handing him things nobody expected to find. The story of this list is really the story of a man lowering cameras into the void again and again, and the void, quietly, refusing to be empty. Starting with a creature that isn't even supposed to be able to leave the ground. Number 1 is the sea cucumber, and I know exactly how that sounds. On the surface, a sea cucumber is about the least frightening animal in the ocean, a soft blob that sits on the seabed and eats mud. But the ones filmed at the bottom of the Mariana Trench do something their shallow cousins can't. They lift off. Cameron's expedition captured holothurians, which is the scientific name for sea cucumbers, that could detach from the seabed completely and swim, drifting through the black water like something half-imagined. Down there, they are not a curiosity, either. In the deepest trenches, these animals can make up a huge share of the large life on the floor, slowly working through the thin layer of nutrients that drifts down from far above. And one of the biologists who studied the footage believed the biggest of them might be a species no one has ever named. Sit with that for a second. Not a rare animal, an unnamed one. A creature living at the single deepest point on Earth that we have watched on video, that we have hours of footage of, and still cannot put a name to, because nobody has ever managed to bring one up to study. It's down there right now, drifting in the dark, and on our own records it doesn't even exist by name. Number 2 barely looks real. In 2016, a NOAA research ship called the Okeanos Explorer was flying a remote camera through the water near the Mariana Trench, more than 3 kilometers down, when a jellyfish drifted into frame. And I mean drifted, hanging there almost motionless, with 2 separate sets of tentacles, one long and trailing, one held out stiff and straight like the spokes of a wheel. It's a type of hydromedusa, and its inner structures were lit up in electric yellow and red, So vivid and so precise that when Noah released the clip, people flatly accused them of faking it. It looks like something rendered on a computer for a science fiction film. It isn't. Scientists think that stiff, wheel-like posture is how it hunts, hanging dead still as a living trap and waiting for prey to blunder into it. We know almost nothing else about it. It was seen, it was filmed for a few minutes, and then it drifted back into the dark. And to this day, it has never been formally identified. So this is a glowing animal in near-freezing black water. Not fleeing the lights, not panicking, just poised there patiently, fishing. And that's the part that unsettles me. It isn't the strangeness of how it looks. It's how completely calm it is, perfectly at home in a place that would kill you in a heartbeat, as if the camera and the lights were the strange visitors, and it was simply watching them arrive. Number 3 broke a record that had stood, essentially untouched, for half a century. 2020, during that 5 Deeps expedition, Jamieson's team dropped a lander deep into the trench and caught a Dumbo octopus on camera. You've probably seen the type, the round little body with 2 fins that stick out on top like elephant ears. This one belongs to a group called the finned, or umbrella, octopuses. Soft-bodied animals that flap those ear-like fins to move and can spread their arms into a webbed umbrella to drift. This one was filmed at 6,957 meters. To put that in plain terms, that is nearly 7 kilometers straight down, more than 4 miles of ocean stacked overhead. For a long time, people assumed octopuses couldn't take that kind of pressure, that there was a depth past which the whole group simply gave out. The previous deepest octopus ever recorded was a single blurry photograph from around 5,000 meters, taken about 50 years earlier. This sighting shattered it by more than 1,800 meters. And it did something bigger than break a number. It redrew the map of where an entire animal group can live. Before this octopus turned up, scientists estimated octopuses could survive across roughly 75% of the seafloor. After it, that figure jumped to about 99%. One small octopus, going about whatever it is a Dumbo octopus does, quietly opened up almost the entire ocean floor as possible octopus territory. One thing I'm honestly curious about while we're down here, if you could ride one of those landers to the bottom and watch all of this through the glass yourself, would you actually do it? Or is this exactly as close as you would ever want to get? Tell me in the comments. Number 4 is what happens when something small refuses to stay small. Amphipods are shrimp-like scavengers, and near the surface they are tiny, the kind of thing you'd need tweezers to lift. But in 2014, Jamieson's team filmed one alive at the bottom of the Mariana Trench that was nothing of the sort. It's called Alicella gigantea, the supergiant amphipod, and the largest of them stretched to around 34 centimeters. That is roughly the length of your forearm. A scavenging crustacean, normally the size of a fingernail, grown to something you could barely close your hand around. It's an example of a strange deep-sea rule called gigantism, where certain animals in the cold and the dark balloon far past the size of their shallow water relatives, and nobody fully understands why. One idea is that in a place with so little food, growing big and slow and efficient simply pays off. Whatever the reason, the result is genuinely unnerving. When something dies and sinks to the bottom, it doesn't rest there. Within minutes, it vanishes under a writhing pile of these pale, oversized scavengers that strip it to the bone. But here is the part almost nobody mentions. When researchers looked closely at what was inside these deep amphipods, they found a compound in them that human medicine was, at that very moment, scrambling to understand. A molecule being investigated as a possible treatment for Alzheimer's disease. Life at the very bottom of the ocean was quietly carrying chemistry we were racing to unlock in our own labs. In the emptiest place on Earth, the thing that thrives is a swarm of giants, sitting in the cold, waiting for something to fall, with a possible medicine inside them. Number 5 is the one that looks the most like a ghost. Before we get to it, one quick thing, because it sits right before the 2 strangest animals on this entire list. If you want more of the deep the moment it goes up, subscribing is genuinely how you catch it, and there is a lot more darkness left to cover. Okay. At around 8,145 meters, cameras filmed a snailfish, and it barely looks solid. It's small, pale, almost translucent, with wide wing-like fins and a head that scientists themselves described as looking like a cartoon dog. You can very nearly see through it. It drifts rather than swims, its tail rippling, completely calm in water pressure that should crush almost anything with a gas-filled space inside it. And that is the whole trick. A snailfish has no scales and no swim bladder, the gas pocket most fish use to stay buoyant, because at these depths a pocket of gas would be a death sentence. Instead, its body is soft, watery, and gelatinous, built to let the pressure pass straight through it rather than resist it. It isn't fighting the trench. It has surrendered to it so completely that the crushing weight has nothing left to crush. Down there, it has almost no competition and almost no predators. So this fragile, see-through little animal essentially owns one of the most hostile addresses on the planet. It feeds on the tiny crustaceans that gather on the trench floor, the same amphipods we just talked about, which means this delicate ghost is quietly a predator, hunting in a place we assumed was a graveyard. Everything about it says it should not be here. It looks too soft to survive a fall off a table, let alone 11,000 meters of ocean, and yet it is one of the most successful animals in the entire trench. Which raises the obvious question. If a fish can go this deep, just how much deeper can it go? Number 6 is the answer, and the answer is a wall. The snailfish family holds the record for the deepest fish ever filmed, and that record has crept down over the years to 8,336 meters, caught on camera in a trench off Japan by a team Jamieson worked with. But here is what makes it the strangest fish on this list. It is very likely sitting at the deepest a fish can physically ever go. Fish protect their bodies from the pressure using a molecule called T-meters AO, which keeps their proteins from being deformed and crushed out of shape. The deeper the fish, the more of it they need to carry. And somewhere between about 8,200 and 8,400 meters, the chemistry says a fish would need so much of that molecule that its own biology stops working, its cells unable to balance against the water pressing in. Below that line, proteins simply stop folding correctly, and a fish cannot exist. It's not that we haven't found a deeper fish yet. It's that, as far as the chemistry goes, there may not be one to find. So this pale little snailfish isn't just deep. It's living at the exact edge of what vertebrate life on this planet is capable of. A few hundred meters lower and the rules run out. Think about what that means. There is a floor to how deep any fish can go, written into the chemistry of every single animal with a backbone, including you. And this creature is pressed right up against it, living on the last habitable line in the ocean. Number 7 is the one I can't get out of my head, because it isn't really an animal at all. Scattered across the trench floor are things that look like fragile honeycombs or crumpled paper bags, some of them larger than a dinner plate. For years, people assumed anything that size had to be a colony, thousands of tiny organisms clustered together. It is neither. Each one is a single cell. They're called xenophyophores, and they are among the largest single living cells known to exist anywhere on Earth. One cell, the size of your open hand. To sit with how wrong that is, remember that nearly every cell in your entire body is far too small to see without a microscope. This is a single cell you could pick up in your palm. Scientists have now found them more than 10 kilometers down, deeper than almost anything else. And where they gather, other life gathers too, using their structures as shelter. And it gets stranger. To build their delicate shells, xenophyophores pull particles straight out of the water and the mud around them. And in doing so, they concentrate whatever is down there inside their own bodies. Tests have found them holding high levels of heavy metals, lead, uranium, mercury. So the largest living cell at the bottom of the world sits in the dark, quietly hoarding radioactive metal. And that detail, the hoarding, the pulling of whatever's in the water into their own flesh, is exactly where this whole thing takes a darker turn. Because those metals are not the only thing being pulled out of the water down there. When Jamieson's team started collecting the amphipods, those oversized scavengers from the bottom, and testing what was inside their bodies, they found something that has no business being there. Plastic. Tiny synthetic fibers and fragments, lodged in the guts of animals living at the very deepest point of the sea. Across a range of deep trenches, more than 70% of the amphipods they examined had plastic inside them. And in the Mariana Trench specifically, the deepest one of all, it was every single animal they tested. 100%. Sit with that for a second. These creatures live in the most remote, least reachable place on the entire planet. A spot almost no human being has ever seen with their own eyes, that sunlight has never once touched. At the bottom of a trench, it took us until 1960 to reach it all. Fewer people have stood at the deepest point of that trench than have walked on the moon. And our plastic got there first. It's already inside them. Inside species we haven't even finished naming. Tangled into the bodies of animals we only just proved could survive down there in the first place. We spent a century wondering what monsters were hiding in the deep. It turns out the thing that beat us to the bottom was a piece of us. So look at what that flat, dead, lunar desert actually turned out to be. Sea cucumbers that swim. A jellyfish, so strange people called it a hoax. The deepest octopus ever recorded. A scavenger the length of your arm, carrying a possible medicine in its body. A fish pressed against the literal chemical limit of what a backbone can survive. And a single cell you could hold in your hand, hoarding metal in the dark. Every one of them real. Every one of them actually filmed, down there in the dark. And here's the thought worth holding on to. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of the deepest parts of our own ocean. Almost none of that trench floor has ever been seen by human eyes, and nearly every time we drop a camera into it, we come back with something we cannot yet name. 7 creatures that shouldn't exist, from a place we wrote off as empty. And that is only the handful we happen to catch on camera. There's a whole world down there in the dark we've barely started to look at, and every one of these animals was found in the tiny fraction of it we've actually pointed a camera at. Whatever else is down there, in the basins we haven't surveyed and the trenches we haven't dropped a lander into yet, is still sitting in the black, unwatched and unnamed, exactly as it has for millions of years. And some of what's been pulled up since is even harder to explain than anything on this list. I'll see you on the next one.